Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of over 700 videos uploading twice a week with a live stream every weekend. Normally I'd say sit back and grab yourself a beverage, we're about to get deeply nerdy, but today don't grab anything to eat or drink. This video is probably going to put you off your food for a little while because right now it's time to talk about Obox-Ob, former Prince of the Abyss. The one being in the multiverse that causes Demogorgon to stop in his tracks and look over his shoulder. We'll be talking about the very genesis and nature of the Abyss, the fate of Obox-Ob and the rise of the Queen of Chaos and the Tanar'ri demons. We shall be plunging into the very limits of the most corrupted planes and get to the very heart of what demons are and what they're doing. There is a need, I think, for an expansion on the lore, and some parts of what I'm about to present to you are assumptions and concepts grounded in published lore, but for some parts there is no reference you can go and check. My intention here is to convey a plausible origin, some backstory and additional detail, where previously authors had just waved their hands in the air and said, it's cosmic horror, or it's in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, or it's unknowable, or it's before the recordings of any living race. I know you want more, so here it is. In a fantasy multiverse where powerful beings can travel through time and reorganize reality itself, talking about beginnings is not as specific and finite a concept as we'd like to believe. There are many beginnings in the D&D multiverse. So let's instead say here we're talking about the end of one multiverse and the beginning of another, from the demon's point of view. In a nightmare multiverse where evil and chaos were the dominant traits of pretty much everything, incredibly powerful life forms had destabilized their dying reality to the point that it could no longer sustain any form of life at all. They existed in demiplanes and parasite dimensions totally under their own control, each with the power of a god within their own pocket realities. But the very fabric that contained these structures was unraveling at the seams and every life form was doomed. The greatest among them, the Obyreth, in particular, a group that included Pazuzu, Pale Knight, Dagon, Beckard, Ugadenk, Vroth-Kun, Kabiri, Uberthar, and many others, joined with the most powerful among them, Obox-Ob, and found a way to siphon all of the remaining life force in that multiverse and use it to punch a hole, a pathway, into and through the void between. These beings couldn't transport themselves as they were. They had to become purely psychic entities, pure imagination. They became the idea of themselves. The most powerful, the most sure and dominant made this transition with their form more or less intact, but the vast majority of other Obyreth were shattered, sacrificed and merged into a violently insane mass of fractured parts, all desperately trying to reform into individual minds and egos again. The greatest of the Obyreth, Obox-Ob, absorbed this vast energy and extracted from it the most pure expression of evil, and with it created a beacon of this pure concept that lanced across the void and gained the attention of the most powerful mind that was staring into this same void from somewhere else. And thus, one of the most potent primordial powers of the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse saw something in the void and made mental contact with it. In a fraction of a second, Obox-Ob and all the other Obyreth poured into Tharizdun's awareness like a virus. They boiled into existence within the bizarre edges of possibility that is the very limits of Tharizdun's imagination, what was and still is the Far Realm. Suddenly Tharizdun had the power of a force of pure evil with which he could shatter the barriers between any reality he wished. It could destroy absolutely anything, and it gave him supreme power to reorder and undo all of reality. His imagination was filled with madness. He felt a strong urge to manifest this shard of ultimate evil in the realm of imagination and belief itself, the astral realm, where he could use it to immediately obliterate all other powers and be the one and only power. But other aspects of himself across distant planes and parallel dimensions just had enough basic restraint to instead give him that sense that it was perhaps wiser to test it out first, in the same cosmic construction site that the primordial powers had used to form the prime material plane. Thus Tharizdun instead manifested the ruby shard of ultimate evil deep within the heart of the elemental planes, and from his feverish and twisted imagination poured the Obyreth Lords, each arriving as a foreign thought, a weird concept in Tharizdun's mind. which the primal power then manifested into reality. As the other powers in the D&D multiverse recoiled at the incredible shockwave with which we can barely even describe and quickly reacted to try and contain this disaster somehow, the manifested Obyreth broke the shard away from Tharizdun and plunged through the hundreds of dimensional barriers in order to secure their escape and freedom, and the notice of the distracted powers. This was the birth of the Abyss, and the eventual inevitable doom of the D&D multiverse. Also, something to consider. Other primal powers of other multiverses may also have made mental contact with the shard across the void. There may be other mental duplicates of the Obyreth Lords which were manifested in those other realities. This may not be the only Abyss, and the corruption may be far worse than even we can begin to fathom. Best not to think about that too much. Eventually the gods figured out a way to contain Tharizdun and prevent him from manifesting anything else or carrying out his idea of unmaking reality and starting over. His prison seems to be mental in nature, since no other power other than his own could possibly contain or control him. So basically, Tharizdun is trapped in his own imagination, where he dreams. While he dreams, the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse exists. When beings within the multiverse somehow gain access to his dreams, the Far Realm pours out into the multiverse and threatens to begin breaking down all barriers between mind and matter, and eventually unmaking it all. Whatever else happens, Tharizdun must never wake up. Some secrets are so incredibly important that mere mortals should never know such things, delve too deeply into forbidden lore, and risk running into the dark forces that protect all of reality, such as the dreaded undead god of secrets, Vecna. Many of the more inexplicable balances of power in the D&D multiverse hinge on such secrets. Thus, to the unaware, they seem to make no sense at all. Why do the celestial powers not step in to stop the blood war and deal with the forces of evil? Could it be because the true powers know just how tenuous a situation they really exist in? Maybe. It could be that the celestial realm is not here to police and fix the multiverse. It merely exists to guard the one way out, and is preparing itself endlessly to fight an unwinnable battle merely to buy enough time for the worthy to escape before it all comes crashing into utter ruin. Who knows? Meanwhile, Obox-Ob was not happy. His plan to become manifested within the astral plane and immediately convert all of this new multiverse over to one of his own design had failed. Instead, he was left burrowing through the dimensional barriers, one after another. It was like he was a worm trying to get to the core of an onion, but as he dug into it, it just seemed to expand with more and more layers. The closer he got to the very heart of the multiverse, the further away it seemed, and the more weird and disconnected the new planes seemed to be. The Obyreth have alien minds. In the multiverse they come from, most travel was between dimensions. The transitive planes were just masses of conduits to different realms, and the prime material was nothing more than a void space, filled with garbage no other being wanted in their own pocket dimensions, and populated with teeming masses of vermin. So Obox-Ob, Lord of Vermin, was a supreme power, well adapted to dominating planes who naturally viewed the prime material as largely worthless. But still, it was progress, and as he expanded into and created the Abyss, his tremendous load of energy dispersed into it, beginning its own transformative process, corrupting and mutating raw matter into the organic forms which the fragmented Obyreth minds manifested in order to regain individuality and ego once more. Thus, crawling out of concentrated ooze-like pits of the seething corruption, the first demons started to spawn, but they were wild, chaotic, crazed and confused, most having no idea what they were or where they'd come from. The trauma experienced by every demon from their shattering and recreation from the imagination of a god-driven insane is something no mortal can ever truly understand. Suffice to say, the first demons, and the majority of them to this day, are random in form, and know only a core mentality of rage, pain, and confusion. There is a strange sameness to this. Those who spawn and manage to survive for more than a few hours are by necessity generalists. Only the most adaptable make it. Those whose forms are too weird and minds are too broken quickly become nothing but food for the rest of the spawning horde. The territory of a spawning pit is a cannibalistic killing ground for demons which constantly winnows down the mass and ensures only the strong, capable and predatory survive. Where do these layers of the Abyss come from? how accurate is it to even call them layers? Much like the Feywild and the Shadowfell, there were once additional parallel dimensions of the Prime Material. In places where natural cosmic divides existed, there was a chance that the shard would break through somehow, from some random other place. These were once planets within crystal spheres in the Phlogistons. These were once the personal domains of gods. These were once parts of the great cosmic wheel of the outer planes. These were once great chunks of the elemental planes. When Obox-Ob broke through into these places, the Shard of Ultimate Evil shattered reality and created random conduits, connecting one location with thousands of others in a way that no mage or god would ever dream of doing. It was as if some insane power had simply grabbed the entire location and tore it loose. The conversion of these planes was so brutal and immediate that the native lifeforms there often had no chance to adapt, and everything died horribly under waves of snarling and savage demon spawn. In many planes of the abyss, lifeless wastelands are the norm, with nothing but ruins of what once was. Also, it's possible to walk among the ruins of worlds that currently exist, but at some point in the far future, they may have been torn free of space and time and become another layer of the abyss, added to the chaotic maelstrom of shattered reality. After all, time is just another dimensional barrier to Obox-Ob and the Shard of Ultimate Evil. Obox-Ob at that time was a vast entity, occupying many different planes simultaneously. His physical form and his mind existed cohesively regardless of what part of reality any segment of it was moving through and observing at any given moment. He was a being of pure chaos, a nightmare that drove any creature native to the D&D multiverse insane just looking at any part of him, as they were literally seeing the destruction of reality right before their eyes. Obox-Ob was a conduit for the shattered Obyreth concepts of their original form, and in order to bring them back into reality, he had to keep consuming and converting vast amounts of new territory, connecting realms, stealing energy from the past and future, using Tharizdun himself to construct, in his imagination, a new order of things. In essence, Obox-Ob was like a virus, stealing raw materials from an infected cell to construct more of itself. Obox-Ob was so powerful because he was, in part, made of the insanity of a greater god. Now, as you digest that, let's take a closer look at other Obyreth Lords who slipped through intact and now found themselves in this new, malignant reality. Formerly masters of their own pocket realms, now left scrabbling over the ruined scraps piling up as Obox-Ob's corruption slowly overtook a new and infinite multiverse. Some, like Pazuzu, adapted to it well, assuming new forms and blending into a being who rose to dominate many of the border layers between the abyss and the rest of the multiverse. He styled himself as the prince of the lower aerial kingdoms and kept many of the forces of elemental air at bay, as they were on the early forefront of the battle in the elemental planes against the formation and spread of the abyss, which seemed certain to completely consume the elemental planes and thus spread corruption to all parts of the prime material plane much more rapidly. If the elemental forces, in particular the genies and the wind dukes of Aqua, the Efreet and the Dao, had failed to stop this, every time a wizard summoned elemental power created walls of stone, decanters of endless water and such, demonic essence would pour into the prime material plane instead, and all of the elementals would have been replaced by demons long ago. This, the first pivotal battle for reality, was waged not by the forces of the outer planes, but by those of the inner planes. And here is where we come to the story of the Queen of Chaos, the Spider Fiends, the betrayal of Obox-Ob, the creation of the Tanar'ri, and the corruption of celestial forces, which resulted in the realm known as Baator, which we know as the Nine Hells. Baator is the realm that has been broken off from the cosmic wheel, and then retaken by the celestial forces and brought back into the outer planes. But doing so created the celestial beings now known as the Batizu, the devils. This plane is still very much at risk and represents the demons' best hopes of managing their original goal of invading and corrupting the outer planes of the astral realm, so its strategic importance is absolute. This is the reason why the celestial forces will never wage an all-out war against the devils. They need them there to protect them against the abyss. How long has all this really been going on though? It's often hard to imagine, or as the Dungeon Master, to accurately portray the infernal beings that the player characters are dealing with. They're sometimes tens of thousands of years old. The Demon Lords are even older. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years of experience. They were around before human beings even existed. For example, the Queen of Chaos and Obox-Ob existed before the world of Toril was even created. The time of Obox-Ob's rule and the events that resulted in the rise of the devils is called the Age Before Ages. It's hard to say how long one era lasted before another began, and it's unknown exactly how the Queen of Chaos attacked and killed Obox-Ob. It certainly must have occurred on multiple different dimensions simultaneously. My personal theory is that she figured out the connection between the sleeping god Tharizdun and attacked Obox-Ob on a conceptual level via the Far Realm, but I have no idea really. It would have been a nigh impossible task that required tactical genius, and it would most likely have involved the unthinkable move of manipulating the mental state of Tharizdun himself, which could very easily have resulted in the complete destruction and remaking of all of reality. It was the most risky gambit ever undertaken, not just because it could end the multiverse, but because any being willing and able to do that was automatically the enemy of all other powers in the multiverse. So the Queen of Chaos wiped herself from memory. The Queen of Chaos once had a name, but in order to protect herself, she removed all traces of it and forgot what it was. I could not even tell you if the form she has now was her original form, were it not for the historic records of the Vati race known as the Windukes of Aqua. The Queen of Chaos's current form is that of a corpulent woman, with the lower body consisting of a beaked octopus maw surrounded by 10 mauve tentacles, her head sprouting green and noxious hair that looks like seaweed, crowned by the skull of a huge sahuagin. She carries a powerful weapon in the form of a trident and currently resides on the 14th layer of the Abyss. The Queen of Chaos has remarkable strategic genius, which is perhaps only exceeded by her unbelievable ego and thirst for power. She was most likely the first of the Obyreth Lords to look beyond the squabbling for new territory in the expanding borders of the early Abyss, instead looking with more interest into the largely ignored prime material plane, and it was she who discovered that life already existed there, and that these life forms had these things called souls, which were very different to what the Obyreth were used to, and a much more powerful resource. And then I guess she must have made the connection in that moment between the power of Obox-Ob and his control over the shattered soul stuff from the old and broken multiverse they'd all come from. I read one account that claims that it was her observation of a mortal soul in a freak occurrence, accidentally fusing with the elemental plane and manifesting in the birth of a genie, and in that moment she put it all together and hatched her plan to cut off Obox-Ob's power, usurp it for herself, create her own army of slaves, and dominate the multiverse. So, let's say the end of the Age Before Ages was her alliance with Miska the Wolf-Spider, the demon race he commanded called the Spider Fiends, and her assassination of Obox-Ob. I should point out that her alliance, a very personal alliance with Miska, created the Spider Fiends. She and Miska spawned a vast number of these things, which include the variations called the Kaku, the Spithruku, the Raklupus, the Pizarrazu, and the Lycosidolith demons, all sharing similar features. They're basically spider wolf fiends. It was these that she and Miska used as the very first wave of demon assassins to infiltrate and attempt to wipe out all social order and governance in the elemental planes. This was a whole new tactical shift from the perspective of the elemental plane's inhabitants. It was cunning tactics in place of brute force, and they could sense that some massive internal shift had taken place, and they were now in a whole different kind of war, one not led by Obox-Ob anymore. The Spider Fiends working together were highly effective, and the war was most certainly going in the Obyreth's favour. But then, the potent artifact called the Rod of Law was created by the Vati and deployed in a famous battle on the plains of Pesh, a battle which involved atrocious sacrifice of life on the part of the Vati that they've never recovered from, and with it they struck down Miska the Wolf-Spider, removing him as Prince of Demons, and in the process, whether planned or not, sparking total rebellion in the Abyss, where all of the Queen of Chaos's clone trooper Tanar'ri rose up against their Jedi Obyreth masters. The war effort splintered, the head of command of the Tanar'ri war beast was cut off, and the inner elemental planes were saved, forcing the surviving Obyreth into exile and hiding right up until the present time. When the Queen of Chaos struck down Obox-Ob, she destabilized the Abyss itself and liberated vast amounts of what was to come to be called the demonic energy. With this and the mortal souls that were trickling down into the Abyss of their own accord, she employed the special powers of the Cypriax Obyreth to spawn all of the Tanar'ri forms that we know of today, including what would turn out to be her greatest creation but now her bane, and completely beyond her control, Demogorgon, the current Prince of Demons. Obox-Ob was destroyed, killed and dethroned, his plan shattered, but a small part of him, a manifested aspect of one of his true forms, still survived. This is the form that we know as Obox-Ob currently. It is a hideous thing. As with all of the Obyreth, his true form can cause madness in mortal beings merely from them looking directly at it. This one surviving aspect escaped the Queen of Chaos's purge by hiding away in a remote layer of the Abyss called Zionyn, until it seemed that the coast was clear to return and merge back with his greater self, except it was no longer there, and not only that, the Obyreth were no longer in charge at all, with the Abyss teeming with demon spawn and these engineered Tanar'ri forcing the aspect of Obox-Ob to remain in Zionyn for the time being, gathering enough power to challenge Demogorgon, Orcus and the rest, and retake the Abyss for the Obyreth species to get things back on track. What very, very few know though is this could be much more quickly achieved if a second long-lost aspect of Obox-Ob manages to escape confinement from his original home plane, called the Blood Shallows, a marshy realm filled with large hills, while the colour of the skies and clouds were reversed, the atmosphere being white and the clouds being blue. The water itself was blood red and dangerously acidic. Currently, only an insane Bannerloth knows of this other aspect of Obox-Ob imprisoned away there, but it is probably just a matter of time before they discover the truth and find a way to consolidate their formidable power together. The other aspect of Obox-Ob shares the same general appearance, resembling a giant platter-shaped centipede with an insane thicket of spidery limbs, each tipped with razor-sharp talons. Rather than a uniform number and distribution of them along the body, they're just haphazard. 3 scorpion-like tails tipped with jagged stingers drip black venom, and they're carried high on the body that moves with them forward, as though they were the head of this creature. However, the tail end has a thick neck connected to a vaguely humanoid head, or rather 3 heads layered one on top of the other, with 6 malevolent eyes, on a twisted face that is split open to reveal a shark-toothed maw with a long drooling tongue with a dagger tip. This infected wound of a maw roars blasphemous litanies that just melt mortal minds, while that wicked purple and red tongue flicks about like a snake tastes the air, the dagger tip a corkscrew spiked hollow like some sort of a torture device. So into the present age, Tanar'ri now rule, and Obox-Ob has been largely forgotten by the lesser lords and the demon princes of the Abyss. However, Obox-Ob is not content to rule Zionyn, and constantly rages across the face of this layer, bringing destruction and ruin to the Ekolids who dwell there and worship his fury. Reduced back down to his old role as the Prince of Vermin, Obox-Ob wants nothing less than to catch and torture the Queen of Chaos for all eternity. Murder Demogorgon, claim his title, and then cleanse the Abyss of the taint of Tanar'ri and return it to Obyreth rule. But before he launches this plan, he first seeks to reclaim the true power he held so long ago. Obox-Ob's search for power extends to the material plane. On some material plane worlds, his cult is quite powerful. He recently almost managed to draw an entire world into the Abyss to fuel his ascension, but failed at his task when heroes of that realm opposed him by engineering a devastating disruption of the flow of magic to that world at a crucial moment during the ritual. Since this humiliating defeat, Obox-Ob has quietly observed his remaining cults, waiting for one to achieve similar chances at success in the future. Until then, these cults maintain a low profile, often basing their activities in ruined cities lost in vast deserts, where they can be close to the scorpions so sacred to his faith. His unholy symbol is a scorpion dangling by its tail from a jawless human skull covered with twisted runes. The scorpion's tail is threaded through the skull's eye sockets. His clerics are, of course, usually fairly insane cult leaders who are granted access to the divine domains of chaos, destruction, entropy, and evil. The legacy of the Queen of Chaos is incredibly important to understanding why the demons, chaotic to their core, are somehow recognizable to us in these named and fixed forms. The Tanar'ri are engineered for a purpose. They are forced to conform to programmed archetypes designed by the Cybriacs and the Queen of Chaos. Each form has a function in the greater Tanar'ri horde, and no matter where they are or what they're doing, being a Tanar'ri means that the Abyss calls to them on a very primal and fundamental level. Above all else, the Tanar'ri exist to spread chaos and evil, to expand the power of the Abyss. If Tanar'ri demons expect to be on the material plane for extended periods of time, they'll often either find places reminiscent of their chaotic homes or set about creating one. In this way, Tanar'ri who can open portals or summon other Tanar'ri to them always seek to do so, as this act also expands the influence of chaos and evil throughout the planes and also strengthens their power on an individual basis. The more demons are amassed into one area, the more power they seem to derive from each other. Okay, whereabouts is Obox-Ob at the moment? Well, it's time to take a trip to one of the worst places in the entire multiverse. Let's talk about his Obyreth minions. You can think of them as Obox-Ob's nigger angels, the Ekolids. An Ekolid is roughly the size of a wolf. At first, they resemble the union of a scorpion and a spider with a six-legged ant-shaped body, but instead of a head, it has several skull-shaped protrusions on its thorax, littered with a cluster of unblinking black eyes. 6 gossamer wings arranged in 2 rows sprout from its back, and 6 lashing, pulsating intestinal tentacles tipped with dagger-like spikes emerge from its bulging abdomen, which drips sizzling acid and squirming egg jelly. Ekolids are often heard before they're seen, the thrumming of their wings and the chittering of their many throats blending into the maddening thrum of countless Chasme demons also infesting this realm like clouds. Obox-Ob hates the Chasme, but it's somewhat soothed by the vile and extremely murderous Ekolids. Ekolids are intelligent, but aside from sculpting corpses into structures, they concern themselves only with reproduction. Ekolids only reproduce by implanting their eggs into living creatures, including other demons and Obyreth, a horrifically painful process that takes mere moments. Once an egg is under the skin, hatched and voraciously chewing through the flesh. The closest thing to an emotion Ekolids ever display is the gleeful chattering they produce when watching their young bursting out of a screaming host. Ekolids are usually solitary. They can be found in swarms throughout the lower reaches of the Abyss, especially in arid regions with constant heat, wandering as savage predatory parasites. But within Zionyn, so close to their lord Obox-Ob, they display a remarkable mockery of civilization, existing in teeming hives, building vast hive cities like towering ziggurats constructed from the resin-preserved corpses of millions and millions of victims. These temple cities feature great slave markets where hags and other evil beings dump living cargo for whatever trade they can get. These unfortunate souls are then brought to immense areas where the vile Ekolids partake in performance hatchings, watched by the nobility of their disgusting breed like ancient Romans watching gladiatorial combat. As you can imagine, the thousands and thousands of corpses quickly decompose under an immediate onslaught of bacteria, fungus, and countless nightmare insects that infest any dead flesh with their squirming maggots. Under the constant drone of bugs and vermin, one can hear the frequent squelching wet splatter and pops as bloated corpses swell and burst open, scattering filth as thick as mud just about everywhere. Some have likened the canyons and ravines of Zionyn as nothing more than giant mass graves, and the atmosphere being less like air and more of a barely breathable stench. Enterprising hags and Yugoloths have harvested many of the worst pathogens in the entire multiverse, just from sloppy puddles of bubbling fluids on the side of a road, wending between stacks of oozing meat. Stepping off the roads can be too easy to do, but finding oneself sunk into a bog of rotting flesh is extremely dangerous, as these rot marsh areas are teeming with abyssal maws, endlessly munching away at anything they can sink their formidable fangs into. And they are just the smaller versions of much larger abyssal worms and tremendous oozes that gorge themselves and only occasionally burst up out of the mass and then burrow back down into it again. It's a very unpleasant place, and it's said that any mortal being who finds itself on Zionyn and hears that droning sound will never get that sound out of their head again and never be able to forget the smell as long as they live. So there we have it. The Dungeons & Dragons multiverse is so full of many evil monsters because it's in a fragile balance, a dream state of a hoodwinked elder primal power. The celestial forces are just treading water and preparing for the inevitable doom of all existence. We know that at the very summit of the 7 mounting heavens of Celestia, there is a doorway that exits the D&D multiverse entirely for realms beyond understanding. Meanwhile, Asmodeus maintains the eternal blood war. Hags and Yugoloths profiteer off this endless war, and mortal life continues on the prime material plane, feeding into this grand effort to just maintain the status quo. Now you understand why Mordenkainen has the opinion that keeping the balance must be achieved at basically any cost. I certainly do. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do and your mind was just blown a little bit. Check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos. Share this video by all means. Buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.